modern-day prospector is quite a contrast from that whiskered codger of the 1840s who went picking for silver with a pick, shovel, pan, and scales. Well, the modern prospector is also lured by that treasure ahead, and he gets a great deal of excitement out of his treasure. And as he goes out, he boards his automobile on a Saturday afternoon and heads for the antique shops, armed with knowledge and a small reserve in the checking account. Well, hopefully that modern prospector is not melting down the silver, because its antique state could be worth quite a bit more than its melted down state, considering that a piece of silver not too long ago brought $100,000. Well, I feel that we need to be armed with a lot of knowledge, and so I invited the one and only Betty Beckman to be my guest on silver. Betty Beckman was given 2 pieces of silver a couple of years, well, 25 years ago. In fact, it seems like a couple, doesn't it?
Well, actually, those pieces that I received that were Cincinnati silver, I received about maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, okay, and so anyway, she did a lot of research after receiving these 2 gifts and found that there was hardly anything on Cincinnati silver, and she decided to write a book. And in 3 years, it was published, and everybody around knows it as the Silver Bible of Cincinnati. Well, I feel quite privileged that Betty Beckman is with us today, and I certainly have a lot that I want to know. I feel that silver is an area that everybody wants to know quite a bit about today, Betty. Now, all the items that you have represented here, are these sterling silver?
No, these are all coin silver. And I'll have to explain to you what coin silver is.
Definitely.
We all know, most people don't even really know what sterling is. Sterling is 925 parts of pure silver to 1,000 parts. And
that's almost pure, isn't it?
Yes, pretty, very, I mean, it's really as pure as you can have it and have it strong enough. It has to have an alloy for strength.
Oh,
silver is too soft otherwise, without any alloy in it. And so sterling comes from the English. The English put in the sterling standard, and they put that in about the 13th century. But we never had, when this country was founded, we were not on this, weren't on the sterling standard, and coins did not have to be of sterling quality. Most coins were about 900 parts of pure silver to 1,000. And
that seems close enough to
coins,
me.
Yeah, it isn't that different, and it doesn't really make any difference in the value as far as an English sterling piece compared to an American coin piece of the same period, because it is pure silver. I mean, it has a little more alloy, but it is.
So the word coin, now you mentioned coins, and so this coin silver comes from coins?
Also from the fact that people, when silver was not mined in the United States in the early years, and so there was a shortage of silver, so that the people who wanted a piece of silver made for them took coins. Now, see, they could be any kind of coins, as long as they were silver, into the silversmith, and gave them, say, $4, dollars or whatever. It could be any country coin as long as it was silver. And then the silversmiths melted it down and made it into a piece of silver for
And this
the
was
customer.
done how long ago?
Well, actually,
coins?
since, silver has been made in the United States since, once the settlers were settled enough to have a little more leisure and time to use silver.
But how long did they take coins in? When did that start?
From the very beginning of silversmithing in America.
Oh, so coin silver has been made for a long
yes,
time
all
in
the early
America.
American silver is coin silver.
Okay, now what we have represented here, from what I understand, Betty, is 19th century coin silver. And which would be the earliest piece that we have here?
Well, this would be the earliest piece.
And how do you know?
Well, partly from the shape. You see, this shape is from around 1800. And it was very, very little of this was made in the Midwest. You see, Cincinnati wasn't founded till 1788, and it wasn't settled until after the Treaty of Greensburg in 1795. So that the silversmiths, the earliest record we have of a silversmith working in Cincinnati was 1802. And this silversmith, Samuel Best, was working in Cincinnati then, and so that this early shape...
Well, he took up silversmithing as soon as he arrived there.
Well, actually, his family was a family of silversmiths, and he came from...
They migrated here.
Yeah, he came from England.
Okay, now...
And so that he would... In fact, he was one of the few early silversmiths who advertised that his silver was of sterling quality. You see, because he had that English tradition.
Okay,
so
that was important to him.
Yes, so he brought that to this country,
Okay.
you see. But that was very, very rare that they advertised
Okay.
that.
And what would be the next one? You say this is close to 1800.
Right, and then this one was made by Samuel Best's brother, Robert Best. And this one was, you see, the shape is changed.
Okay.
I can see...
Oh, yes, I can
the
see
round
right down in, what do you call this, the neck area?
Well,
Or is this-
I don't know what you'd call that part
Okay.
of it. But this I call the, I can't think of the word now, but anyway, this is what we start to call the fiddle thread. Once it gets out of this shape, although this doesn't have a
And
fiddle.
that even
but-
looks more like a fiddle than this
Right,
one. Okay.
and,
Then we're getting into what date era?
This would be like maybe 1815.
1815.
Right, and
Oh, there's quite a change in that period of time, Betty.
Definitely,
What
you
would a
see.
piece like that be worth?
Well, this most probably around the $500 or so, up or down. Could
Vary just
Yeah,
slightly. Okay,
right.
now let's hold that one there a second. Now, are we getting into a later spoon here
yes,
then?
see now this, how this end broadens in here,
Sure.
and that is changing into the 1820s. Now we're going. You see how that
yes.
shape changes?
Oh, yes. Okay, now hold that just one
All right.
second, and let me go and get another one here, because
Now
this one
see-
is different also.
That's right. And see, that has the rounded end, and that's coming into the 1830s. And see, and after you get used to the different shapes,
Okay.
you can date a piece of
By
coin
the
silver by
shape.
the shape. Now, this is
Okay.
the shapes that I'm showing you here are typically Cincinnati shapes, although the early shapes would be comparable, I mean, the whole state of Ohio, and I'll show you later some Ohio pieces.
This pretty well carries throughout the Midwest
Right.
when we're talking
yes,
about shapes.
at this time.
Okay.
You know,
Now, let's pick up a much later spoon over here and show
All right.
something different.
now this particular shape, which is a really, I'll show you
Okay.
in a tablespoon and a teaspoon.
Oh, that's
This-
lovely.
Which I call this shape. It doesn't really have a name, but I call it an exaggerated fiddle handle spoon. Now, it was only made really to any great extent in Cincinnati. I have seen maybe one similar piece from different parts of the country, but
So how would this one date then?
the 1840s.
Okay,
And
1840. Now, what
practically-
is the latest spoon that you have right in this area?
Well, in that area, the 1840s would be the
Okay.
latest.
Okay.
Now, I have other, you know,
Okay, now we're getting to 1840. What would we see after 1840? Could you give us
well, we're going into a little bit, well, the shape changes to this shape on this shape here. This continued to be made, and it was made in other places in Ohio too, into the 1870s. This was the last shape of coin silver that was made. After that, they started to go into pattern silver, you see.
Okay.
So that this was...
Well, you can tell a lot by the handle
Oh,
shapes, can't you?
definitely. And you can tell a lot where they came from, you know, that
It would
there are
tell you-
certain shapes, for instance, that were only made in New England. And the minute you see that shape, you say, well, that's a New England spoon.
Okay, but this is typically Midwestern
This
here.
is all
Now, we have
Midwestern.
something here that's quite ornate. Are we talking about something that's quite a bit later, Betty?
Not so much later. This two brothers who, well, they were the best brothers. There were actually three brothers in that family. But these were made by two Cincinnati Silversmiths who were brothers, Edward and David Kinsey. Now, there is more silver by Edward and David around than any other Cincinnati Silversmith. So that their silver is a little less rare and a little less valuable because...
What would a set like this?
Well, now this
might be
would
worth?
be a whole different story because we're talking about the work on this. I don't know whether the camera can
Yes, the
possibly pick it
detail,
up.
the
but
artistic
the whole,
really.
right, the engraving on it, and, well, I would say, you know, $600.
Okay, now
easily.
Betty, we have something up there. Can you reach that? That's an unusual twisted handle on
Yes.
there.
Now this was made by the Doomey Company. The Doomey Company was the Tiffany of the Midwest. It was started by Herman Doomey in the 1840s, and it continued in business after his death, although after his death it separated into two companies, and it was never
Well, there's kind of
quite
an
as-
interesting picture. Can we hold this up here with the spoon?
Yes.
Because this is a picture of a showroom, a Doomey showroom. And you say that people traveled all over.
from all over the Midwest to buy Doomey silver because he had workmen come from all over Europe. He went abroad and brought workmen back, and the silver made in the Doomey shop he never made any plated. It was all sterling or coin, you know, as he went into the years that we were making sterling, the sterling standard had come to the United States, which we didn't ever get to.
Okay, well, we might.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so that it's all coin or sterling, and it's all very heavy.
Let me
Now,
feel that. Oh, that is heavy.
Yes. And see, it was
Yes.
just the finest made. And,
Yes.
and it was as fine as any made in the United States
Okay,
at
now,
that
you say
time.
really fine. What would a piece like this be worth?
Well, there again, you're talking about changes. I'd say around $600.
No, that is,
You know,
that
around-
really is
And
a
that's
lovely
another.
spoon. Now, does the, what about the signatures? Will that determine the value of a piece?
Very definitely. As I said when we were speaking of the Kinseys, because their silver is fairly common,
Yeah.
unless it's an unusual piece or a piece of hollowware, their silver would always bring less than
okay.
someone else who was not so common. And
Well, the signature, are there, I know in the pewter world, sometimes they get really fancy. Are the signatures in silver very fancy signatures?
No, just very.
I know you have a picture here of a signature. Is that
Yeah,
a typical signature?
Yeah, definitely.
Let me hold that
says
slant a little bit there.
our best, and that was Robert Best that I was speaking of earlier. His family, Samuel and Robert and Thomas, were the three Best brothers. And,
Is most everything signed in silver?
most everything, but you do run into pieces that are not signed. Often it was made, some silver that they might have made for their family, and so they didn't mark it, you see. And
But there's more marked silver than unmarked.
there's more marked, and if it's unmarked, the value is way down.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
really interesting to know. Well, what about
because-
condition of a
condition
of a piece?
is very important.
Everything here is in such good condition, but what could be wrong that would
Well, there
determine?
could be all kinds of tears, and I have one
Okay.
that has a lot of bubbles in the spoon and everything. And if it's just a spoon that's a collector's spoon, and they really want it for the mark,
Okay.
they would.
If it's a rare mark.
If it's a rare
They'll
mark,
go
they
along with
buy
any
a
condition.
spoon no matter what condition it's in. But of course, you're going to pay top price for mint condition.
Does
you
your
know.
book talk about rare marks then, so that we know that there's a?
I show all the marks that I've found.
Yes.
You see, and if there's a mark that isn't in my book, and it's like an early mark, if someone finds a spoon with a mark that isn't in my book, they know that it has to be fairly rare, because if it was before 1850, after 1850, I wasn't as careful to
Yes.
identify every mark of
Okay,
it,
well,
because
Betty,
that wasn't as important, really.
I can see that it is important to know the shapes, and it is important to know the signatures before you buy, and it's important to know condition, especially for someone who's really just getting out into the market. Probably your advice would be to buy the perfect
Well, actually,
piece.
yes, if you can find it. And actually, if you buy in the market today, you're not going to pay as much as you pay for a sterling spoon when you go to the store. I mean, if it's something that you can use, it would be, it's great to buy it, because you can buy some beautiful pieces and use them and pay less than you would for a new piece of sterling.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well,
And-
now, Betty, you have some interesting pictures here of some hollowware, and I would like to show this one to the viewer. Now, what period is this?
This is actually dated 1850, and this was a presentation set. He was the head of the fire brigade, some fire brigade, and it was Fenton Lawson, I think. And each piece has a scene of a fire on it, and it is just absolutely magnificent.
It is.
And then the little firemen are the fenials. You see the little?
Yes.
You can't really see
Are these
that.
in a private collection?
This has been loaned to the Cincinnati Historical Society, so they use it for their events. You see, so it's just a magnificent set.
Oh, it certainly is. And here is another fantastic piece of hollowware, and this would I would assume that this is a little bit later because it's more ornate. It looks Victorian.
It is more. It's
kinda
most
like
probably the 1870s. I've forgotten. I don't remember where that's dated. It could be, but that is a tremendous. In the picture, you don't get the. It's just tremendous to read, and it's just with this bird on it, and it is just fascinating to see that. Now that's in a private collection.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
You know the person who has it?
Yeah.
Okay. And here's another lovely piece. It looks a little bit earlier in my...
Yes, it is a little, but I think it's maybe 1870, though. But this is a condiment set, you know, the mustard and salt and pepper, and it's a really... just a sweet little set.
Well, you have a couple of tumblers which fall into the category of being hollowware. They're so simple. For some reason, they look like they're earlier 19th century.
Well, yes, especially this one, which is maybe...
I picked up the right one, didn't I?
Yeah, this is the earliest. This is 1820 about, and this is the earliest one, although there are earlier... there is an asbestos cup that's a beaker that's earlier than this.
Who owns silver? Not just the average, everyday working person, certainly.
Well, some people collect all kinds of silver. Like some people can collect souvenir spoons, and so a lot of people do. I mean, if somebody just wanted to collect, say, a salt spoon like this.
That wouldn't be too expensive of
That's
an
right.
area.
It wouldn't be too expensive, and it would make a marvelous collection.
Okay, a good answer, but I was getting on to, you know, who owned it back in the 19th century? Were the average citizen? Or?
Well, the average citizen might have owned some tablespoons and some teaspoons. They didn't own a complete set or a tea set. You know, they just couldn't afford it. But it was good investment, and they could use the spoons and enjoy them.
Yes.
And yet they always had the silver.
But when it came to teapots and coffee pots, probably the wealthy were the ones
Right, they were
who owned the silver.
Right.
Was now, you talk a lot about makers or silversmithing in Cincinnati. Where did the art, or where did their learning process begin?
Well, of course, some of them came from England, some from Switzerland, there were France, there were from all the European countries, and then some had come to the United States and were apprenticed to silversmiths in the East, and then when they became full-fledged silversmiths, they would move west and establish a business.
And they started establishing, you know, right away in 1800 in the Midwest. So Midwestern silver goes way back.
Actually, it's Midwest, Kentucky and Cincinnati, Marietta, Ohio, and a few places like that. So you see, if you say Midwest, like Cleveland and Chicago were founded much later. So they did have silver when they were founded, but it's not as early as...
more like maybe mid-19th century, or not
right.
quite, maybe not that late.
Yeah, but 1830s before they really, you know, were
Well, now, for the collector, does some of the finest silver come from the East Coast or from
some of it
Easterners?
would be more valuable, definitely, because it would be earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but although Southern silver in the coin silver field is the most valuable because so much of the Southern silver was lost, you see, in the
During
war.
the Civil War.
And so it's much more rare. You
And
pay
therefore much more valuable.
much more, much more expensive to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you see, if you get around Boston, New York, where there were all kinds of silversmiths, the value is much lower.
Is that right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Even considering the silver content.
That's right.
But you place a lot of significance on the signature.
Oh, yes, because when people collect, they try and get examples of different silversmiths. And so some people don't. I mean, some just want to enjoy using maybe a half a dozen dessert spoons or something like that.
That's kind of a study in itself, isn't it? Just studying silversmiths.
Oh,
But,
yes.
Did they strictly make teaspoons and hollowware?
Well, no, they had some of them, I mean, most of them repaired watches and sold watches in their shop. A lot of them made jewelry, some of them made clocks. And so there were all these trades that were usually associated with the silversmithing. And now there were some who just made mostly silver, like the Kinseys I was speaking of earlier, the Kinsey brothers. They had what they called a silverware manufactory, and they sold actually wholesale to silversmiths, say in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because I noticed on the front of your book you have it that you have jewelers, watch, and clockmakers.
Right.
Because you could go into any silversmith shop, and you would be able to have jewelry made.
right,
Watches.
right. Now the
Clocks.
watches they would handle. They didn't make that many watches. It's really rare to find a watch made by but they ordered them. Maybe they made the case, or you know what I mean. But they ordered, and they repaired watches. You see, and so that.
Where do you think one of the finest centers for making silver would have been in the Midwest? Let's just
I
take the
think
whole
Cincinnati.
Midwest. You're not the actual, are you?
No, nothing like that.
But,
No, but actually-
but comparing Midwestern silver, Cincinnati silver with Eastern silver, it definitely has a special quality that's...
Well, I think the early silver is the simplicity of it, and then, of course, when you got into the later Victorian silver, they were making as fine, and there were the Ostcamps. There was an Ostcamp, who was also making silver in Cincinnati. The forerunner of the Ostcamp Knowltons,
Yes.
and they're descendants of the Ostcamps in Cincinnati, too.
Well, I would like to just play a little game here and see if I can guess. Now, we've touched on this one area, but this particular tong, thank you, appears to be so simple in form. Now, a novice, is it earlier than most of the other pieces on the table?
Yes, definitely.
And then as we get into the Victorian era, am I right in saying that the tongs become much fancier?
Yeah, now, actually, most of these are not quite into Victorian. They're before 1850, so you'd say they're just pre-runners to a Victorian, you see.
Okay.
But you're right, they definitely became more ornate.
Well, now, Betty, just in observing here, spoons seem to be the most popular flatware. What about knives and forks?
Well, in the East, they did make some knives and forks, and many more forks than knives, and they used steel knives or bone-handled knives and those things. But they made very few knives in Cincinnati. In fact, I've only seen knives made by Dumey, aside from pearl-handled knives. They
He
did
must have
use.
been something else.
Yeah, he was. I mean, his shop was fascinating, and I can show you the different pieces that were made by the early smiths too, which I.
Oh, okay. I'd like to see that.
You see, I showed you the large ladle, which we
that's
looked
a
at,
beauty.
which
Yes.
is the one
Okay,
type.
let me hold
All
that a
right.
second. And
Then this is a smaller ladle that I don't know whether this was a cream ladle or a gravy ladle or what. I'm not sure because you know, I've never had anybody show me exactly
Now,
what.
this is a very interesting shape, and now we're getting into this,
Yes, it's
similar to this spoon here.
right. That would be
Okay.
around in the 1840s.
1840s. Hey, all right.
Now you're
we're-
getting good.
Okay, we're getting on to this now.
And then now this one is another one, but now this is the 30s. You see, that has that fat round end.
Okay.
And that would be the 30s.
Good. Now, this is a little quiz.
And
See how well
now
you're
this
doing.
is a little.
Okay, and this
A
is,
little, I don't know exactly what all these ladles were for, but that's a different sized ladle.
okay.
And then this is a little mustard
Oh,
ladle.
and that's the ladder, because I can tell by
Yes.
the little scallop across
Yeah.
the top.
Right.
Okay, how do we care for our silver?
Well, keep it, I find the easiest way to take care of it is, well, just to keep it clean and put it in a plastic bag. You
Wrap
can
each one individually?
Well, you can if it's something that would scratch.
Keep it in a dark place?
No, you don't have to
Is that
keep
right?
it, if you just
Hey,
keep it in a plastic
That's
bag.
just a tail. Huh?
And the best part about it is in a plastic bag, you can see it.
What about all these people who are out there manufacturing these silver boxes to sell in a plastic bag? Okay, you just put them out of business.
The best things for spoons are the newspaper bags.
Is
You know, they're long, narrow bags.
Yes.
And so if you're putting a ladle
I
or a
noticed all these
spoon
little narrow bags you have all these
these
things
from the
in.
newspapers. So if you want free bags, get them from the newspapers.
Well, now there's if someone's going out to find things, will they pick up something at a flea market or?
They could. Actually, people know little about silver. There are very
They
few
know
people.
more now, Betty.
They know more, but even now, they don't know very much because they don't know what the marks mean.
Yes.
There are thousands and thousands.
And you just happen to know of a good book they can buy to be a little bit more educated on this. And we have really capitalized today on a great deal of talent and a great deal of background. And I think everybody's ready to go out and make their big purchase with their first spoon. And all the antique shops better look at it. And we sure thank you for being with us. It's been a real pleasure, Betty, and happy hunting to you.